Good afternoon. Thank you for coming, having your lunch. So you'll notice my name isn't David Jones. Unfortunately, David isn't able to make it, so I'm going to do a slightly different talk. Hopefully, you'll find it interesting. And what I really wanted to talk about today is the state of the software supply chain. And really, this is about what's happening in software development now as it relates to especially open source consumption and development. And I've subtitled this The Illusion of Control. So my name is WaiMan Yau, and I work for a company called Sonatype. Some of you may be familiar with Sonatype because the founders of Sonatype are the people who created Maven. And alongside the creation of Maven was the creation of Maven Central. So this is the binary repository that when you're building applications, people use to share and consume components. So one of the things that we do every year is we have a little bit of fun and we do a lot of research around the types of components that people are using, and also, if you like, the quality in terms of the applications that people are developing as it relates to defects and security vulnerabilities, these sorts of things. So my colleague, Derek Weeks, gets to do this once a year. He locks himself away for 4 weeks, and he comes out with a report. Now, one of the things that we've noticed over the last few years is that more and more with modern application development, it really is taking on a supply chain model. What we have is a number of suppliers. In this case, it'll be open source projects. We have warehouses or repositories that we go get our parts from, and we also, at the end, post our finished goods, the applications themselves. And the manufacturers, of course, are us. We are the people who are assembling these components into finished goods. And more and more, we're seeing that modern applications nowadays are consisting of up to 90% third-party libraries. So what that means is that we as developers are writing source code, and then we're pulling in all of these other libraries, and they make up the majority of an application. And one of the reasons for this, I think, is that we have some great build tools nowadays, and a lot of these build tools take care of things like dependencies, and so when you're building your applications, they're pulling in all of the libraries that you need without you having to specify anything. Of course, the problem with that is now you have this issue with visibility. So I mentioned that we are the stewards of the central repository, so we run that on behalf of the community. Would anybody like to have a guess about how many downloads from the central repository we had last year? Any guesses? 10 million? A billion? 100,000? 17 billion downloads. So the point about that is, yes, it is a big number, but what we see is that number is growing year on year. So the idea that people are creating and assembling applications this way is, I think, only going to accelerate. More people will be consuming and posting to the central repository. And as part of this research, what we saw was, we have over 106,000 organizations. These are enterprises, if you like, who are using the central repository. So it's a staple of application development, modern application development in the enterprise. Now, one of the things that we asked right at the beginning, during this survey, is how many organizations actually have a quality control process for the components that they use. So, over the last 3 years, generally speaking, we're seeing that half of all organizations have a policy, which obviously means that the other half don't. So I don't really know what that means. Does that mean that organizations really don't care? I don't think so, but only half of them do. The other thing that we ask, as Sonatype, one of the tools that we provide the community with is Nexus, which is the binary repository. So we also are able to look at where these requests are coming from. And we're seeing that 95% of all downloads. Now, this is of the 106,000 enterprises that are downloading from the central repository are still downloading from the tools themselves, even though they have Nexus as a binary repository. So what I think that tells me is that there is still that lack of control within the development environment over where components are being consumed from. So these organizations have Nexus. So there is no reason not to route your builds through Nexus. So only 5% of them are using a repository. Now, when we look at the top 30 organizations, when we're looking at the 160, what we're seeing is that the top 30 organizations are consuming hundreds of thousands of components a year. So over 240,000 components per organization. Yeah. Now, when we look at those downloads, what we're seeing is that generally, of those 240,000, there are 7,000, over 7,600, what you might call suppliers. These are the different open source projects that people are downloading components from. And of those, there are over 18,000 parts, individual versions of libraries that people are using. Okay? So there is a big mix of suppliers here and parts that are being used. Now, when we look at those parts and we start to look at things like known defects, what we see is that over 7.5% of all downloads contain known defects. So these are defects that we know exist inside the components. And of those, more than half of them, that's 66%, have defects which were known since before 2013. So these defects have been there for more than 2 years. Okay? So again, you've got to ask yourself, why is that? Yeah? And I think potentially this is a visibility problem. Now, if you look at the average application now, so that's kind of the average of the top 30 organizations, what we're seeing is that on average, each application has over 100 components. So we see that. And then within those components, those applications, each application contains 24 defects, security defects. These are known security defects. And we see on average 9 restrictive licenses. Now, that may or may not be an issue for everybody, but certainly if you're shipping and delivering software, that's probably something you want to think about. So on average, there are 9 restrictive licenses in every application. So I've been talking about averages so far. I think this one is a very interesting statistic. This is a particular bank. Now, of course, I'm not going to name who it is. This one actually has quite a high level of downloads from Central. It's nearly 400,000 per year, components being requested. And what you see is that in the CVE download space, over 25,000 of the downloads that they're downloading have known security vulnerabilities, of which 130 are critical and 4,000 odd are severe. So these are level 7 security vulnerabilities or higher with a level 7 score. And then you look at all the different licenses. They have 600 different licenses which are being downloaded into their environment, and 2,000 to 3,000 of them have restrictive licenses, again. But the one on the right is the one that I find very interesting, which is this idea of version dispersion, right? So on average, they're downloading 37 versions of every component, on average. So at the bottom there, we've listed the top 10 components. Spring is obviously very popular there, right? Spring, as far as I know, there are 89 versions of Spring out there. This company is just one version away from having the whole set. So they have 88 versions of Spring, yeah? And one of the questions we often get asked is, well, is this really, is it a theoretical problem or is it a real problem? Now, many of you probably recognize these, right? And I think the really scary statistic here is not so much that they have vulnerabilities, it's that ever since these vulnerabilities were reported, hundreds of thousands of times, they're still being downloaded. Years afterwards. The one at the bottom, Bouncy Castle, is particularly interesting because that's for encryption. Yeah? So people who really care about security use Bouncy Castle. And since 2009, one of the critical vulnerabilities, since then, it's been downloaded, actually, it says 214, more than 214,000 times since then. Right? So the question, again, is why is that, right? And again, whilst these vulnerabilities exist in the components we're using, are they really exploitable? And what we're seeing here, this is a report from Verizon. Basically, what it's saying is that the number one attack vector for the bad guys nowadays is via your applications. And that's because I think most other routes into your organization are pretty well protected. Networks, servers, etc. Yeah? So this is the number one way that people are trying to get into, the bad guys are getting into your applications. We have no visibility into the quality of the components that we're using and building into our applications. Every day, 50 new vulnerabilities are being found. So this is a very real problem. Now, the great thing is that the way that I described it before, it's almost like a supply chain where each of the people on the supply chain are able to choose any component they like. They can choose any door, if it was building a car, any engine, any wheels. Yeah. But of course, modern supply chains don't work like that. So the problem of how do you create a high quality, fast velocity supply chain has been solved. Okay. So, and it was solved quite a long time ago by, you may have heard of this chap Deming. He was the father of what's called lean manufacturing, which is where lean development came from, and then agile since then. And using those techniques, of course, car manufacturing is much better nowadays than it ever was. And just as an example here, in the car manufacturing world, you've got Toyota Prius against the Chevy Volt. Toyota Prius, much cheaper. They sell a hell of a lot more of those. They have far fewer suppliers. They have far fewer parts that they develop themselves. So they rely on fewer suppliers, but higher quality suppliers with higher quality parts. Yeah. So I think that there's definitely things that we can learn from the Toyota supply chain model. And so this is what I said before. But if you mix that with automation, that's really where we want to go. Manual processes definitely don't work anymore. We can see that in some of the data that we've been looking at. And if you do that, this is applicable to anything that you're building. But you improve your supply chain productivity, less rework, less complexity. In our world, technical debt is quite important. Easier maintenance, easier remediation. In the world of building cars, you build it right first time. You don't have to fix it at the end. Yeah. And that's really what I wanted to talk about. If you want to know more, please go to the Sonatype website. We have the software supply chain report. There's loads of fascinating material that I have not been able to cover here. And you can download that now. It's 30-odd pages. If you can't sleep at night, it's probably quite a good read. We're out there in the booth near the Java user group. So if you want to come over, we're very happy to talk you through some of the solutions, some of the things that we think that we can help you with in order to get better supply chain management. And I think that the realization that you need visibility and you need the ability to track parts is kind of step one in how you improve your supply chains. But the great thing is, as I said before, the problems on how to solve this problem have already been solved. We just have to apply it to the way that we're building software today. Thank you. Any questions? Hello.
Do you think that in the future there should be, so for example, you have a high quality manufacturer for your car,
yeah,
part, and he realizes that there was a quality problem with it. He can pull it back, right? He can inform you that there was a problem.
A recall, yeah.
A recall, exactly. Do we need that?
Yes. So I think one of the key pieces of supply chain automation as it relates to software development is the ability to track every component as it goes into your software development environment, and then also be able to track it as it goes into production. So when something goes bad, today, a particular version of Bouncy Castle is good, but tomorrow it goes bad, you need to be able to identify where in your environment it is, and then quickly be able to go and fix it. Yeah.
Where in the chain of producing your own software do you see the hook points to do that?
I think you need the hook point to be throughout that chain. So you need to be given visibility to your developers on the quality and information about the parts themselves. You need, I think, enforcement points or gates at build time, you need enforcement and gate points at deployment time, and then, whilst you're running it in operations. And the key thing also is that I think all of this has to be automated. It has to be invisible to the developer, because anything that slows the developer down is clearly bad. Yeah. Thank you. So if you have any questions, come and see us. We're just by the drinks at the top there. Thank you.